This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on WZRD Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi. Thank you so much for joining us on WZRD, Assessor Kaegi. How are you today?
So happy to be with you and your listeners again, Trudy. I love being on this show because we get to go into things pretty deep. Thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your dedication to your work. So thank you. What you're most interested in imparting to our listeners is any changes to homeowners exemptions. There are several different kinds. So do you want to go through how the changes, what changes there are, and how our listeners should adjust accordingly?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Trudy. The most important thing to know is that since for the last 2 years, the senior homeowners exemption automatically renews. It used to be that people had to renew it each year, and we just sent out notices in people's mail, and we have people calling us saying, hey, is this really the case that I don't have to reapply again from this possible, and what people needed to know. So as I mentioned, we sent out mailers about exemptions and exemption applications just a couple of weeks ago. It should be in people's mailboxes now. And a lot of people have been calling us or asking us saying, can this really be true? Do I not need to do anything? Because we told people that, hey, here are the exemptions that are in place for you and you don't need to act. The most important of these is the senior exemption, senior homestead exemption. Which as of, for the last 2 years is automatically renewed because of legislation that we worked to get passed in the General Assembly. And so now seniors used to have to reapply to recertify that they were over 65 each year. People don't have to do that anymore. There is a small group of people where we might think they do need to reapply because we're not sure if it's their main residence anymore, and we send a separate booklet for those people, and all they have to do is just recertify to us that it's still their main residence. So that's the main thing to know. We also worked with our partners in the General Assembly to automatically renew a couple of exemptions that do not typically automatically renew, but because of the special hardship that we have under COVID-19, the senior freeze exemption, people with disabilities and veterans with disabilities exemption also are automatically renewing this year unless your circumstances have changed, and then you should bring that to our attention. Those are the most important things that are different from what we usually have. We created a form for exemptions that combines all the different exemptions. You used to have to apply for different exemptions separately, but we've tried to streamline it and make it easier for people so they can apply for several exemptions at once. And so we've created a new online form that does that. So a long answer to a really good question you had, Trudy.
For the senior freeze exemption, so usually if that changes, it's on account of maybe some change in income level, right? That will affect the senior freeze?
That's right. So the senior freeze is one of those exemptions that's means tested. So it depends on your adjusted household income. And we have, so if in the past you were eligible for the freeze, but in the next year, your combined household income goes above that threshold, then you do not qualify for that exemption anymore. And you should not be applying for that because that is not legal. So that's the most important thing for a member of the public to know, that the senior freeze is a means tested exemption, and we on our application and on the website you have information about eligibility.
For the combined, that's a good thing to know. So it's combined household income. So if a member of the household gets a better job, or maybe the senior has to the required withdrawals are a larger amount, then that might affect it.
That's right. So there can be several things that change your income as a senior family, and those adjustments for your gross income are shown on our website, so you can calculate it, so you can make that calculation.
So is it hard to determine? Is there like a set income for a certain number of family members in a household?
Well, there's not a hard and fast rule because of the adjustments. So, but your adjusted combined income needs to be under $65,000 a year.
And that's very easy for folks to do on the website. There's a worksheet, etc.
Yes, that's right.
And for what about for seniors? Some of them are very not computer savvy. I work at a grocery store, and some customers tell me that they really, some of our senior customers, they tell me that they have no idea about how to work with a computer. Besides a family member helping, is there anybody else that might be able to help them if it weren't like for family and friends?
Well, the great thing about the exemptions is that you don't need to apply online. You can apply in person or via mail, and you can also make an appointment so that you don't have to stand in line when you do come here. And a person, if you require help, if you need someone to help you with that process, that appointment process is something else that we put into place recently with our new technology, and that makes it much easier, especially in these times of COVID. No one wants to be standing in line or needlessly exposing themselves to the virus when we have a public health crisis like we have right now. So that's another thing that you can do. And to make an appointment, you don't have to do it online. You can just call our office, pick up the phone, and ask to make an appointment, and we can do that for you. So when people are applying for the homeowner's exemption, they need to remember that you just need to bring proof of residency, proof of property tax responsibility, and property ownership affidavit. All of these are available online. It just takes a couple minutes. And for residency, we accept the Illinois driver's license and ID card, the matricula consular ID, or the city of Chicago ID card, and the ID card needs to match people's address.
What about the forms that people could mail in? Where would they get a copy of the form to fill out?
Sure. To get a copy of the forms, all you need to do is, first of all, people get the forms in the mail, but you can also go to our website to get the forms. Our website is CookCountyAssessor.com, and then just go to the menu to get the pull down menu. And if you need a form sent to you, you can call us. Some people, we know they don't have printers, so you can call us and we can send you the form if you lost your form.
Okay. Well, later at the end of the interview, please provide us with your phone number so folks could have your number to call. Yes.
Actually, I can give you our phone number now.
Okay.
But I will. I'm just going to pull it up right here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our website. I haven't committed it to memory yet. Our phone number is 312-443-7550.
Thank you.
And again, the number is 312-443-7550.
Okay. Has anything changed with the homeowner exemption?
With the homeowner exemption should automatically renew each year once you've already applied for it. If you newly bought your home, you want to make sure that your homeowner's exemption has been applied for. So that's the most important thing that I think people need to know. That is not a different process from in the past, but a lot of people aren't used to this. Maybe they haven't bought a home in a long time. So when you apply for the homeowner's exemption, you can apply online or in person or by mail. And like I said, all we need is the proof of residency and property tax responsibility and the property ownership affidavit. These are all online, available at our website. If you're listed on the deed at the clerk's office, that will suffice. Otherwise, a deed, trust agreement, or stock certificate or occupancy agreement with your name on it is needed to apply for the homeowner's exemption. But again, that is not new. These are the rules that have been in place for a long time. We've really upgraded our website, upgraded the online functionality. So you used to have to do all of this on paper Now you can do so much of it online. And to submit those documents, you can come in person if you prefer to do that rather than do it all.
Do you have any idea how much paper you've saved without with everything, with a lot of it online now?
We've tried to do the math. I mean, we're definitely saving in the 6 figures on paper costs at the office, which is extraordinary. If you when we came into our office in December 2018, we saw this scene that sort of looked like the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you had the boxes sort of extending to the horizon and occupying a whole city block from Randolph all the way to Washington, stacked up to the rafters of a really tall ceiling, 600 tons of paper for just appeals applications for 1 year. And now most of our applications are taking place online, dramatically reducing the amount of paper we have. And same thing for the exemptions. We get many exemptions being applied for online, more being applied for online than on paper.
What about the senior exemptions? Has anything changed with that? Like, is there qualifications? Is everything exactly the same as before?
Nothing has changed with the qualifications for the senior homestead exemption. The thing to remember is when you turn 65, then you become eligible for this. So a lot of people have not applied for it before. So when we have new people becoming seniors, we want to make sure that they are enrolling for that senior homestead exemption, which they haven't known or been eligible for in the past. And so what is new is that in the last 2 years now, you can apply for it online. You just have to fill out a paper form for it. You can now do it online from the comfort of your own home and track the progress on the application at our office. We are, that's the one thing to know. And then the thing that's new in the last 2 years is that this automatically renews once you're enrolled. So that was that important legislation passed by the General Assembly that automatically renews the senior exemption.
Yeah, because they can't go backwards. Like if they're 65 already, they can't become 64. If they could, that would be nice.
Exactly, Trudy. I wish it was the case that we could get younger and turn around Mother Nature, but none of us are getting younger. It's a well-known biological process that we're aging. We all age, so you shouldn't. It was always a really unfair imposition on people that they had to reapply for the senior exemption to recertify that they're still over 65. And the only reason that, as I understand, the only reason that the General Assembly required that is they didn't have confidence in the assessor's office ability to keep track of who had passed away and who had moved. And once we showed and demonstrated that our technology was up to snuff to do that, we no longer had to have that imposition. We're proud that we worked with the General Assembly to get our office in a position so that we're serving the public and not putting extra troubles on them when we have so many things to worry about every day.
And what is the age that someone becomes eligible for the senior homestead?
Once you turn 65, you are eligible for the senior exemption. And so if you can go to our website and just check on your date of birth, and it will tell you if you're eligible.
Then what about if the birthday happens like sometime in the middle of the year? Is that exemption prorated so that they're not getting it for a part of the year and are getting it after they turn 65?
Such a good question, Trudy. Yeah, a person must have been born in 1956 or prior. That's the rule that we use that the law applies for the senior exemption. So if you were born in 1956 or before, you're eligible. If you're born in 57, you got to wait 1 more year.
Yeah. So once they hit 65, they get it for the whole year, even if they're only 65 for 1 day of that tax year.
Yep. A good thing to remember is just if you were born in 1956 or earlier, you're eligible. You're born in 57. Get your pens ready. Get your pen or computer ready for next year. And otherwise, you got a couple of years ahead of you. But that's the rule of thumb.
Okay. we don't hear much about the persons with disabilities exemptions. Could you tell us about those eligibility requirements?
Definitely. So for the person with disabilities exemption, this is a really important one for folks who meet the definition of having a disability under our state's eligibility requirements. So here's what has not changed, and let me tell you about how you qualify. So here are the things that have not changed. You have to, if you're disabled or if you become disabled during the 2021 tax year, you are eligible. If you either own or have a legal or equitable interest in the property or a leasehold interest of a single family residence on January 1, 2021, you qualify. If you're liable for the payment of the property taxes, you qualify. And if you occupy the property as the principal residence on January 1st, 2021, you qualify. And if a person's home previously received this exemption, the taxpayer now resides in a facility licensed under the Nursing Home Care Act, their home is still eligible to receive this exemption if the property is occupied by that person's spouse or the property remains unoccupied. So all that has not changed. That is the same as in the past. I'm just looking through my list of the requirements. You can all go to our website at cookcountyassessor.com, and it will tell you the documents that you need to bring to apply for that exemption. It's a document that's produced by our Secretary of State's office, which certifies the disability status of people. We are working on legislation in Springfield so that we can streamline people who get that status at the Secretary of State's office so that we can automatically get that record here at our office without having someone to produce these documents. But right now, under the law, you do have to produce the documents certifying that status at the Secretary of State's office.
How long does it take for the paperwork to get processed?
It can take, good question. So it can take a little while to get those documents produced at the Secretary of State's office. And then once you apply for it at our office, it can take a few weeks at our office to process that. But we can now notify you and update you of your status. The key thing to know is that the exemption is applied in the second half tax bill. So I know people just received their tax bills from the treasurer for the first half of the year, but that doesn't include exemption information on it. We only sent out the applications just now, and it will be applied to your second half tax bill when that comes out in the second half of the year.
Mm-hmm. And even if there's not enough time for it to appear on the second installment, they could still later, when it does get if it's like a process, and then they could still apply for a refund, right?
Yes, that's right. That's such a good point, Trudy. You know, if you missed a deadline to apply for the exemption to have it applied to the second half tax bill, you can still get refunded for those periods when you didn't have the exemption when you qualified for it. That's called a certificate of error. And we have a whole section of our website for certificates of error for so you can apply. You could say you follow all the processes to apply for an exemption, and then you can look back up to 4 years for the years where you qualified for those exemptions but didn't have it, and then you'd be refunded the share of the property taxes that those exemptions would have given you in savings and get those refunded to you. Our office oversees that process. And again, it can take several weeks, but many people do it, and we're happy to provide that service to everyone because these exemptions are something that we all deserve, we're all entitled to, and they provide savings for homeowners. And this is a regressive, property taxes are a regressive system. We want to make sure that everyone is participating in these exemptions that add a measure of progressivity into a system that is regressive.
Mm-hmm. let's just clarify, if people are not the homeowners, but they are paying the taxes for their property, they could still get the exemption if they qualify.
That is correct. If they are the ones who are responsible for the property taxes,
Okay.
yes.
And
that is their single primary residence. That's the other qualification.
mhm, yes. And for the certificates of error, so there are probably a lot of taxpayers that that have not gotten to the point of applying for the certificates of error. Do you have any idea about how much money that the county is still holding that should be returned to taxpayers, but they haven't applied to them for? Just give us a
great question, Trudy. Great question. So the most basic of all the exemptions is the homeowner's exemption, but about 30% of homeowners don't have a homeowner's exemption. Now, some people, this may be because this home that they own here in Cook County is not their primary residence. But I think for most people who aren't getting the exemption, it's just because they don't know about it. So this is, if you're thinking about 30% of homeowners, that's hundreds of thousands of people. And each, depending on which community you live in, that homeowner's exemption could be worth somewhere between $750 to over $1,000 per year. So, we're talking potentially hundreds of millions of dollars that folks are missing out on that really is theirs because they've been overpaying, and people can apply for it. And so really a goal of our team here at the assessor's office has been to expand participation in homeowners and exemptions and awareness in communities where the lack of participation is high. We think that folks who don't speak English as a first language are particularly vulnerable to the disparity of not applying for this basic exemption because they might not be aware of it, or they might be intimidated by the complex language that comes with property taxes and all the paperwork. So we have done more and more outreach to communities to make sure people are participating in that homeowners exemption. The second exemption the second biggest one where we think more participation can be had is that senior homestead exemption. And then the third is the senior freeze. The senior freeze exists because it's there for seniors on fixed incomes. And it's most important for seniors in fixed incomes who live in communities where there have been rising housing prices. And the exemption exists so that people aren't priced out of their communities as gentrification happens, as housing prices rise. And the senior freeze can really be the most valuable exemption for people in that position. And we just want to make people aware of it. A very loving thing that our listeners out there can do is look through your contact list, and you can go to our website and look up their addresses and see if all those friends that you have their exemptions. And if they don't, you can give them a really nice Christmas gift or a holiday gift by saying, hey, I noticed that you don't have exemptions on your home, and this could be several $1,000s coming back to you. Why don't you call or look up the assessor's office and apply? And so this is a thing that we're encouraging people to do.
That's excellent. So folks could just go on your website and type in the address and then find whether that property has what exemptions have been applied to that property.
That's right. So when you go to our website, cookcountyassessor.com, right at the top, you'll see that you can search by address. So if you go to cookcountyassessor.com and you scroll down, you'll see there's a way to search. And you can see that you can search by address. And then when you go to search by address, all you have to do is type in the address, and then it will pull up the information that we know about that house, and it will include the exemptions that it has.
Mm-hmm. Have you done any outreach to political leaders too? Because actually we were speaking with Cook County Commissioner Dennis Deere, and then he mentioned that he has contact with all the seniors. So in his jurisdiction. So if he were able to contact all the seniors about what you're talking about, maybe he could make a big dent into that population that don't have their exemptions applied yet.
Trudy, when it comes to outreach, we are all about all of the above.
Mhm.
That includes elected officials of all stripes. So we've done work on exemptions and appeals with Cook County commissioners, of course, but also mayors, with state legislators, with aldermen, really anyone who serves the public. We're there to serve them. But we also, it's not limited to elected officials. We also do this as a public service with community groups. You know, later today, I'm going to be speaking with a Chinese language group today to make sure that people who, you know, we've noticed that especially older speakers who don't speak English as a first language, who might speak Cantonese or Mandarin, they oftentimes don't have their exemption. So we do outreach to community groups like that. And we're always looking for more partnerships. You know, we have such a wonderfully diverse tapestry of communities in Cook County. You know, we're trying to do more work with different groups who represent different diasporas, but also housing groups, block clubs, anything that brings people together where we can, you know, inform people of this public service. And we're really proud that the largest sort of umbrella organization for assessors in America gave us an award for our public outreach and information during the pandemic, because we've really worked hard to bend over backwards to reach people where they are, especially at this difficult time.
Wow. And that group has about how many assessors?
That's so the International Association of Assessing Officers embraces tens of thousands of assessors across America.
Mhm.
And they recognized us with this award.
Wow.
For the first time we've been recognized by this organization for our work, and we're really proud of that. We also got another award from the National Association of Counties for a digital appeals application, which we put online starting in 2020. So these are ways that we're trying to serve everyone better. We know many people have stories about how they were frustrated by paperwork and service at the assessor's office in the past. We're really trying to step up our game and improve it through modernization and outreach. Just people, we have a wonderful outreach team. If anyone out there leads a community group, look us up. You can schedule an event with us where we can send a member of our staff to come out and reach out to your members and explain just what we're doing here on the show. And
they would just go to your website and find and send in a form there to request.
Yes.
Someone.
So what you do is you go to cookcountyassessor.com. I'm going to do this right now, just like I would if I was a user. And then if you go to contact, there's a menu that says contact. And within the contact menu, there's an outreach request form. And then you just fill out the outreach request form where you sign in with your email. And then there are a couple steps. It just takes a couple minutes to fill out. And then someone from our team will get back to you, and you'll get a little tracking update from us so that you can make sure that we're on top of your request.
Let's help make it sink in how well you're doing. Congratulations on the work. Do you know about how many other assessors have won the award?
Well, you know, they give awards every year for different categories. Mm-hmm. We've never gotten that recognition in living memory from this organization. We hadn't been participating, even though we're the largest market-based assessment jurisdiction in America and the second largest by parcels. So we, you know, since our administration came in, we really focused on learning from our peers, embracing best practices. We actually convened the meeting of this organization in Chicago last year. It was the first time they've been in Chicago for a long time. We invited the assessors from around the world to come here to Chicago. And we were really proud to do that. And we're proud for, you know, that we're starting to show leadership amongst our peers in several different areas where, you know, our office used to be kind of a laggard or even a pariah in this organization. So we have a lot to learn from what works in the rest of the country, but we're quickly becoming a leader, leapfrogging our peers by putting into place new technology and practices that weren't there before.
Mm. Do you still remember what venue you used for the meeting, for the convention?
It was at the Hyatt Regency, and we did it last August and September, and it came at a really good time. You know, Chicago is a very important town for conventions, and we know that you know, our city was hurt hard in so many ways by COVID, but one of them was losing out on these meetings and the opportunity to show people around the world, to showcase Chicago, to have people come together. And it was really wonderful to bring, you know, we brought over 1,000 people from around the world here. We had visitors from Korea and Taiwan and other places that were, you know, many different continents here. And it's fun to show off Chicago, especially that time of year. So we're glad that we did it. It came at a great time to bring people together here in the city that we love.
Well, August is it's a beautiful time of year. It's not too hot. Sometimes it is, but it's absolutely gorgeous in August.
It was just about perfect. And a lot of these assessors don't get out too much. So it was a huge treat for them to come to Chicago and to let their hair down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they're always cooped up in their office and staring away at the computers.
Yes, people are very dedicated to this, and they love to come together to meet.
Let's talk a little bit about the veterans with disabilities exemptions. How is that different from persons with disabilities exemptions?
Great question, Trudy. So the veterans with disabilities exemption is something where your status is certified by the Department of Veteran Affairs. So the United States Department of Veteran Affairs certifies your disability status rather than the Secretary of State in Illinois, which certifies the disability status in Illinois. So and the disability rating, the amount of it given by the Department of Veterans Affairs determines the size of the exemption that you have. And for folks who have 70% or greater disability, according to the VA status, the exemption is quite large. It's $250,000 of equalized assessed value, which for most property owners means that a veteran who has that amount of disability can be exempt from property taxes. So this is a benefit to recognize people who sacrifice so much for our country, for our nation, and our state recognizes it with that exemption. Now, if your percentage of disability is 30 to 49%, you get a $2,500 exemption amount off of your equalized assessed value. For 50 to 69% disability, you get a $5,000 exemption, again, reduction from your equalized assessed value. So those are also important benefits, but it's especially noteworthy for veterans with greater than 70% disability. And that is certified by the a form that you get from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. There's a special form that they issue.
That middle category, was that $25,000 off the assessment?
Oh, sorry. No, it's so 30 to 49% disability. Then the exemption amount is $2,500. So $2,500.
I see.
For 50 to 69%, it's $5,000 off of the equalized assessed value. And for 70% or greater, it is $250,000 off of the equalized assessed value.
Okay. And actually, we have not heard about it doesn't get talked about much, the Veterans with Disabilities exemption. Did it start recently, or has it been around for a long time?
No, it's been around for a long time, for over a decade. And there have been some amendments to it over the years as well. But it's been around. There are fewer people who qualify for it. A couple thousand people rather than the hundreds of thousands who qualify for the other exemptions. So it's a smaller group, but it's very important for people who've sacrificed so much for our nation. And it's an important exemption, very meaningful, especially if you have 70% or greater disability.
Yes. But how do veterans learn about it? Usually, what kind of outreach do they get? Is it like the social workers? Do social workers inform them about this aspect of exemption as well?
Well, Trudy, I mentioned that our approach to outreach was all of the above with
Mm,
all of the different groups. And so in our typical outreaches in a community, we mentioned the importance of this exemption, but we also do outreaches with veterans community groups.
mhm.
So we just had one done by our office last week, and we really focus on these. The veterans groups are important partners, and we encourage people to reach out to us on our website, cookcountyassessor.com, to request an event to organize. Again, people can go to the website and go to the contact section of the website and request an outreach event. And we have a wonderful outreach team, and we love to serve our veterans with these benefits, which they are entitled to because of their service.
Mhm. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, and we have with us on WZRD County Assessor Fritz Kaegi talking about mostly about exemptions. For the veterans, do you have any veterans with disabilities exemptions? Do you have, like for the homeowners, that about 30% of homeowners don't have it. Have you any data that shows like maybe there are how many veterans that should get it, maybe are not getting it?
We don't have a good idea of this number. We have actually, we want to work. I mentioned that we had the assessors across the world in our office last year. There are other states that also have special exemptions for veterans with disabilities. We're trying to work with them and our leaders in Congress so that we could have more data sharing between the Veterans Administration and assessors jurisdictions that have these kinds of exemptions. We don't have that data sharing now, but we suspect that there may be on the order of 1,000, possibly more people who qualify for the exemptions but aren't getting them. And so that's why we always want to reach out to them to make sure that they are.
So what you're saying is that if you're able to share some of the information with if the Department of Veterans Affairs is able to share information with you without infringing on anybody's privacy, then you would be able to get better information about who qualifies, right?
Yes, and there are different ways that we could do this. One of the ways is they could give us a list of people who have disability status, and we can keep the data confidential, but we could reach out to them and say, hey, we think that you might qualify for veterans with disabilities exemptions. Here's what you can do to check. That would be one thing. Another way that we could streamline things with the Department of Veterans Affairs is for those who are applying to us, don't make people produce all these documents. Just once they apply, have us be able to check with the VA, hey, do they have the status? What is their percentage disability? That would streamline that a lot. So those are the two areas where we think just some federal legislation could help assessors across the country do this better and have wider participation in the exemptions that people are entitled to.
Well, good luck with that, and keep us informed if there's any progress in this. We
absolutely will. We have some great representation in Washington, including our Senator Tammy Duckworth herself, a disabled veteran.
Yes. Which homeowners will, are there any homeowners which will not have their exemptions auto renewal, and how would these homeowners know or be notified that they have to reapply for their exemptions? Are there any cases like that?
Yes. So one of the requirements under the law, under the auto renewal law that was passed by the General Assembly, is that we audit the process and check, do some checks for people where we think that they may no longer qualify. So this will be, we subscribe to data sources where it can help us keep track of people who are buying other residents out of state or that they may have moved. And a small, very tiny percentage of homeowners who have the exemption already, we will notify them and say, hey, you need to reapply for this exemption under this part of the law, just so that we're verifying your status. And we make that very easy. We notify people, they get a golden booklet that explains to them this process to make it easy. And we follow up with the recipients of the golden booklet to make sure that, hey, we sent you a golden booklet so that you could re-verify your exemption status with us. We're just reaching out to you because we haven't heard back from you. Please reapply if you qualify.
Mm-hmm. And that reapplication is still open now. If folks need to reapply, they still have time right now?
Yes, that's right. So when we sent out exemption application forms in the mail, we informed everyone hey, here are the exemptions that you're getting that you do not need to reapply for. So people who got those cards, like I said, sometimes people don't believe it, that they don't have to reapply. So they like to check with us. And so we're saying, yep, the card was true. You don't have to reapply. But if you got that golden booklet, then that's one of the cases where you do need to reapply. And we give everyone the instructions on what to do.
Well, we have not seen the golden booklet. Is it really golden in color?
It is, and it's kind of rare because not many people get it. It's maybe a couple thousand people each year, but we do that. We want to make it sort of noticeably different from what people are used to getting, so that they pay attention. And we'll reapply if they qualify.
That's good. Do you know who came up with the idea of using the golden booklet? Because that really captured my attention.
Okay. Well, this was our terrific outreach team. Our outreach team we're trying to give people a different look from what they might have expected from the assessor's office in the past. We brought in one of our members of our communications team, came from the assessor's office in Los Angeles, which is the only other office that's bigger than ours in America. And they're used to communicating with this broad range of, again, a very diverse urban area like ours. And so we've got some insights on what works with other parts of the country. That's kind of a good example. We talk to our peers, and we always try to think about, okay, what is the experience that an average person is going to get in the mail, especially a busy person? How can we get their attention? So that's one of the ways we're trying to provide better service to people.
And the demographics of Los Angeles are comparable to Chicago, right?
Well, they're different, but they're the same in the way that it's extremely big population, very ethnically diverse, many non-native speakers, many different languages. The composition, of course, is different, but the problems are the same, and the solutions, we think, have a lot in common too.
Yes. Well, I volunteer with the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and lately we've been doing a lot of work on seeing if businesses and websites are amenable for people with disabilities. Do you have any idea about how amenable the Cook County Assessor website is for persons with disabilities?
Yes. So first of all, we have made our website readable in Translate, so it's more easily translatable under different written languages than ever before. And I believe that may include Braille. I should check on that. I don't know the answer to that specific one, but I think you can use Google Translate, including Braille, to do it, and it's easier. It's more machine readable. So if you're blind and you speak a foreign language, then again, it's much more accessible than it was before. We have videos, and when we do videos, we try to make sure that we have subtitles under them for people who don't speak the language. But we need to do more on this. I'm aware of, and we're always willing to listen for people from the disabilities community to see what more we can be doing that we might not have thought of, because we know sometimes there are things that we could be doing that we're not doing. So we're very open to that. But we have created a lot more instructional videos so that people can do things more in their home without having to go out to get the same kind of content.
Yes.
We have more instructional videos in foreign languages. And we are working hard to make sure that we have subtitles for people who can't hear.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And where could the taxpayers find these instructional videos?
So you can find them also on our website. So if you go to CookCountyAssessor.com, I'm just going to do this myself right now. We have under the appeals, if someone is doing an appeal, all you need to do is go to residential appeals, for example, and then if you go to, I'm looking for our videos here. Maybe it's an overview section here. You go to appeals, and then you go to the overview section. You can select a language right on the website. So you can select English, Arabic, Chinese, Filipino, Tagalog, Polish, or Spanish, and that will render the language, that page in whatever language you want. So I'm going to pick Spanish here. And then if you pick Spanish, you will see that there are links for videos there. And you can also do this by going to the How It Works section of our website.
How it works. Okay. And that's under overview, how it works?
Yes, so that if you go on the main page and go to How It Works, that's the main menu right up at the top.
Okay.
At CookCountyAssessor.com. There's a frequently asked questions section there, and you can get more questions, and there are many links to your questions there.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, there was, what about so Braille is not in that list. It's only foreign languages, right? That drop-down menu?
Yes, I see that there. Now, I know there is a way that our pages are all, so the drop-down menu are in 6 different languages, but our page can actually be rendered in many other different languages by using Google Translate now, because we've made the page more readable to translate. Oh,
okay. So that was a part of the upgrades that you did for the data in the system.
That's right. So we upgraded our website in 2020, and then we've refreshed it this year so it's more readable for Google Translate. We did that just in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. When you were talking about the appealing property, for the property assessment, etc., is there any information about the comparable properties on your website? That would be so helpful, because I've known of individuals that had to dig through, had to like find newspapers that printed what all the properties in their neighborhood, which would be like a whole big stack, and then they will have to understand the different categories, and then find their category, and it's a big process, and it takes such a long time.
You're right. So I know from my own personal experience, and what my parents used to do is, yes, they would wait for the newspaper to be published with everyone else's assessment in it. Then they'd have this sort of yellowing newspaper staying around as they wanted to look for comparables. But there are better ways to do this now. Now, if you go to our website, CookCountyAssessor.com, and you go to the search menu, you can go to Find Comparable Properties. And in the Find Comparable Properties section, we give you instructions on how to do this. And you can do this through the Cook Viewer application, which sets it up as a map, and lets you look around at through a visualization of the map, find properties that are comparable to yours and see how nearby they are. Sometimes the visualization really helps. We're going to be introducing a tool later this year, which will take this to a whole new level that we call PinVal. The tool is called PinVal, And that will help people not only find comparable properties, but also see specifically how the value was. It will summarize how the value was arrived at for your own property and for other comparable properties. And we think that'll be useful information. Sometimes people are wondering, hey, is it the location of my property that really drives the value, or is it the nature of the construction, or is it the square footage, or is it the school district that it's in? And we'll be able to show what our data science team sees in its model for what drives the value of your home in the market.
Is it the main driver of value, the recent sales, like in the last 1 or 2 years?
Such a good question, Trudy. So yes, that is the raw material that's the most important thing that we look at in trying to understand how the market values homes. What we try to do at our office, truly the job of our office, besides exemptions, is to estimate the market value of buildings. And the most important raw material in that is transactions that have taken place. And whenever there's a transaction, we look at, okay, what do we know about this house that just sold? Where was it? How many square feet of occupiable space does it have? What's the size of its of the land there? Where is it specifically? We can use GIS coordinates, see what else is nearby. We can look at attributes. What's the house made out of? Is it brick or is it a wood frame? What are the numbers of bedrooms? We can look at fireplaces. There are many different variables that we can look at, but whenever there's a sale, that's important information that comes with all those characteristics. And then when we have many sales, we can start to get an idea. Oh, okay, the market seems to, in this area, seems to assign this much value for a bedroom, for a home of this size, of this construction. But these rules, they differ from community to community. So we always want to be careful about generalizing. So our model looks very specifically at comparable homes, and then transactions that take place further out are less meaningful in that modeling. But yes, you're right. It all starts with those transactions. And then the number crunching starts. And the general problem, or the general task before us, Trudy, is that in a 3-year period, maybe 10 or 15% of the homes in a community would have sold. But we have to, over a 3-year period, we have to estimate the value of all the other properties, those other 85 to 90% of homes that didn't sell. Typically, we'll try to extract information from those 10 or 15% that did sell to estimate the value of the other 85 to 90%. And that is basically right there in a nutshell how our residential valuation and data science team tackles the problem, the task.
Is there a tool on the website for the comparable properties that people could jump into just the categories? Because some, like under 900 square feet or something like that, that's one category. If people were able to just like 2-01 or 02, something like that, if they were able to just see all that one category, it would be so much easier. Is that available now?
Yes. So you can do this in Cook Viewer by you go. So again, what you do is you go to our website, cookcountyassessor.com. Then you go to search, and you can go to search by neighborhood to see homes or properties in a specific category. For example, you could see what are the 211, so 2 to 6 apartments, so 2 to 6 flats that are over 62 years old in a community. And you can do that right on our site just by going to cookcountyassessor.com, and then under the search menu going to search by neighborhood. But you can also find comparable properties, which lets you drill down even more using the Cook Viewer application. And when you open that, again, you can search by neighborhood, search by class. There's lots of different functionality there that lets you drill down. And some people do this for their appeals, so they can find comparable properties. Some people just love to drill down and see what's going on in the neighborhood and learn more about it. And it's there for everyone for any purpose that they come up with.
And these changes came under your administration that people could use the website to search for comparable properties?
There were comparable search functions on the website before. As someone who tried to use it, it was not the most user-friendly website or function there before. This one is pretty great that we have on the website now, which is again new as of 2 years ago. We're really excited about the PIN file application. It's going to take it to a whole new level that will be released later this year.
Mm-hmm. Have you met with some of your constituents, and do they tell you about the issues that concern them?
Absolutely. That's one of the most important functions of the job. And you quickly learn when you're elected assessor anywhere in America, but especially in Cook County, the experiences that people have had, which generally for decades have not been great with our office. We hear all sorts of stories about, hey, you don't have the characteristics of my home correctly. My home is just like someone down the street, but their tax bill is really different from mine. Why is that? I've tried to correct characteristics from my home at your office, but you didn't seem very interested in the past, and so I stopped doing it. We've heard all sorts of experiences like that, where people are really frustrated, and we empathize with it. This is why we came here to improve the system. The great thing, Trudy, is that for so long, technology upgrades had been deferred or not done. And we have really focused in on getting that done and taking advantage of the technology gifts that are out there in the world that we all deserve to have in place. So we created online appeals in 2020, a new website in 2020 with a lot of these tools that we've been talking about. We replaced the whole IT backbone of the office in 2021. The IT backbone of the office used to be more than 40 years old. It dated back to when I was playing on my Atari as a kid, playing Space Invaders. And it actually, the data scientists who work in our office, they hadn't even been born yet when the system was deployed. Like, it's not right that we had such an old system, an antiquated system at the heart of our office that really had a lot of limitations. Like, we didn't have enough tables to keep track of all the data that might be important about a house. And then it was very clumsy to update those characteristics. So if people tried to come to our office to update them before, that might not have happened. So now with this new system in place, we can do that. And we can do so many things more. We know for our small businesses in the community, they've had frustrations with the assessment system because they didn't understand where the assessment came from. They kind of were suspicious that it was a black box. What we've done now in the last couple of weeks with this IT upgrade is to open up all our models so people could see for every commercial parcel, hey, here's how the assessor's office came up with the value for my parcel. And then people can drill down and say, hey, here's why this number isn't right. Or, hey, you missed this thing. Can we correct it? And now we can correct it much more easily and get it right. And this is how we see how we provide steady improvement. And Trudy, one of the things that we're proud of is the system was so dependent on appeals to solve its many problems in the past. And people felt like if they weren't appealing, it was a problem. And that's kind of how the system got upside down. So what we've done is really focused on getting it right the first time for people. And now appeals are down by about a third from where they were before we came in. At that conference that I mentioned, I told the attendees about how many appeals our office had, that it was, it approached 500,000 before we came in. And you could hear people gasp and look sideways at each other and shake their head. That's kind of how off base the system was before we came in. And now with appeals down for 3 straight years, now down about 30%, it shows we're making good progress because it's never been easier to appeal, as I've explained. But if our system was massively deserving people, you wouldn't have a decline in appeals like that. So we know we have a lot more to work on. We hear about these from people in the public every day, but I just remind my team is that, hey, we need to walk humbly here We're trying to estimate the value of nearly 2 million properties, and every single one of those property owners knows more about their property than we do. And there's probably something important that we don't know about. So when people talk to us to show us, hey, you didn't get this right, or here's what you need to know, we should listen, take that into account, make sure it's reflected in our work so people don't have to come back and do that again and again. And gradually we'll improve people's knowledge and people's trust over time. That's our belief here.
Well, we're glad that you got enough funding and that you applied the funding to these tech upgrades that helps the taxpayers, and it actually helps your office too to do better work.
Absolutely, Trudy, and we don't do this alone. You know, we have partners in the Cook County Bureau of Technology. They are very important in getting the IT resources of the county across different elected offices like ours and the treasurer's office and the clerk's office. They help us create new applications. They helped us to drive. They paid for and drove the installation of this new IT backbone that I mentioned that replaced the 40-year-old system. And it was really our partners that have moved mountains in helping this to happen. It was their vision and we helped to achieve it. We're proud that we did, but it wouldn't have been possible without them. So we're really glad to have that. And our Cook County commissioners, and our county president, President Preckwinkle, and their wisdom, they came up with the plan and funded it years ago and have continued to support that enactment. So this is not done alone, and we're really grateful to have partners who see it the way we do in terms of where we can take things.
Well, we see a lot of questions like this as well. For comparable properties, they might be in separate neighborhoods, but actually they're only like a block apart, and they might be radically different. They're like the same type of property, and then it's a very about maybe at least a $5,000 difference between the assessments. So any idea about how that happens? And is it just like our neighborhood?
Great question, Trudy. So when people get an assessment notice, they see that there's a neighborhood code there, that we use at our office to describe the neighborhood that it's in. Know that the neighborhood code does not really drive our modeling. It's a thing that we keep track of, but we know that that neighborhood code is not perfect, and it may be out of date because the market's constantly changing. As you know, someone who lives in Rogers Park, the boundaries of what people consider Rogers Park and how the market looks at Rogers Park have changed a lot over the years. When our data science team is modeling and estimating the value of homes, we look at the GIS coordinates of each property in the modeling. We're not using, the neighborhood code does not weigh nearly as large as those GIS coordinates. So we hope that reduces any effects of homes being in a different neighborhood code, even they're nearby. We do recognize that as a potential problem. If people, we know that we're not perfect. So when people see differences that might arise from geographic classification, we always want to know. So people can reach out to us on the website at cookcountyassessor.com. And then we actively will handle inquiries. So you go to cookcountyassessor.com, and then you go to the contact menu, and you can fill out the contact form and tell us what's on your mind. And we read this actively, and we keep track of it. We have a whole communications team that follows the inquiries that you make.
Well, that's the way you keep in touch with your constituents. That's the main source of their concerns, that you could, what's bothering them.
Absolutely. We found that our outreach and communications team is so important for giving people, better experience with our system, which we know we have a burden to bear to not only improve, but also to earn people's trust. It's not, you can't just ask for it, it has to be earned. And part of that is listening.
Mm-hmm. And what does GIS represent? What does it stand for?
Oh, great question. Sometimes we tend to slip into acronyms and jargon. GIS is Geographic Information System.
Okay.
One kind of geographic information system that people use a lot is Google Maps. but they're more sophisticated versions. And we use that as part of our modeling. And so if you have a geographic information system location tag in the model, that tells us to a very precise degree where that home is. And it's good to compare it, like when we see maybe 100 different transactions in a community, to have the GIS code with it to track exactly where it is, the locator. That helps us to see the connections between things. And our modeling, our software can see a lot of these connections in a better way that lots of people can, than like individual people can, just by crunching all the data. And this is something where we think we've made a lot of progress on our residential modeling, Trudy. In the past, there was a lot of statistical evidence done by third parties that showed that we tended to overestimate the value of homes at the more modest end of the price scale, maybe underestimated at the top end of the price scale. And what the research showed is a lot of that was that we weren't sufficiently granular at looking at the location. One example might be the southwest side of Chicago, where you have very different communities. You have Englewood, which is a really low income community that's been hit by so many different problems in the last few decades, but also has many strengths. And then you have Beverly, which is a higher income community, and you don't want to average those two. If you use an average per square foot between Englewood and Beverly, you probably would get an answer that's wrong for both. It might overestimate the values of homes in Englewood and underestimate the values in Beverly. So that's an example. So we want to make sure that we're seeing the difference in communities and the way the market acts in those communities with more detail. And that's why we use those codes. That GIS sounds like some mumbo jumbo, but it's really important. It's what it means for people.
What about for the neighborhood codes? If people were going to do their own appeals, is it if they find comparable properties within their neighborhood codes, those are the best, right?
Yes, so that you can search by neighborhood, and you'll be searching for other comparable properties within your neighborhood code. But you can also use the Cook Viewer so that you're searching not by neighborhood code, but you're just looking for homes that are nearby yours that could go across those neighborhood codes.
Oh, so even if they were in another neighborhood, if there's a disparity, that could still help with their appeal.
That would still pop up, yes. And with the PinVal application that we'll be publishing, that will be even more clear, because there'll be a graphical interface where you can see homes within a certain radius of yours. And, the neighborhood code wouldn't matter.
Oh, what about recent sales? Because before it was kind of hard for people. They would have to go through the papers and see which homes were sold recently, and then compare that with the neighborhood code and the building the code that applied to their property. So is there any streamlining for that?
Well, there is streamlining. There's more streamlining to be done. So when homes transact in a community, they are reported to us with a couple months lag. So if a home sells if a home sold in March, it might not be reported to us until May. But then we take that into account when we were assessing properties, the next year. So the lag is okay. It's just, for all of us, when we're looking on Zillow or other sources, this lag comes from, reporting that comes into our recorder of deeds at the county, which is overseen by the county clerk. And Zillow and us and all the other users, we pull off of that same data. So that's one lag that's out there. But really, if you want to look at comparable transactions in your community, what you can do is, first of all, one way to do it is when we've done a reassessment. For example, if you're living in the north suburbs, and you'll be getting a reassessment notice from us this year, when we publish a report on your community, we include a map of each neighborhood area, and you can see the different kinds of transactions that happened in your community. And you can see the range. You can see the number of transactions and the range and size of them. We plot these on maps as well, so people can see that. And you can, and I think if people are not being reassessed this year, you can look back to the reassessment year when we publish the report and pull down that map. So how would you do this? If you go to cocountyassessor.com and then you go to data and you go to community data overview, you can look at Chicago. For example, we just reassessed Chicago. You can go to the Chicago home sales section and pull down a list of all the sales in the different neighborhood areas. Or another thing you could do is, again, go to cocountyassessor.com, go to data, the data menu, go to valuation reports, and then you can pull down there, go and look for your township. So if you live in the city, you can find the city township that you're in. If you live in one of the suburbs, like for example, in Oak Park or Orland or in Thornton, you can pull down the report there. So I'm going to go into Thornton. And then you'll see that there is a residential reassessment report that you can pull down, but there's also an interactive map that you can click on. And that shows each neighborhood. And then it shows the number of properties, the number of sales in each of the last few years. It shows the median sales price. It shows the range. And you can do this for any community. So really, there's a lot more data on our website than ever was available before to help people find these comparables.
Are they able to also access the category of the property as well? That's very helpful in putting together an appeal so that.
Yes, definitely. So, you know, what I just described. So if you go to data and then the evaluation report section and you go into your township. So I'm going to go into Morton. What you can do is go to the residential, you can go to the interactive map. And then you will be able to see for different categories what the most common property classes, the ranges for transactions, and within the report you will also get information about the different subclasses and the average prices paid for each. So there's a ton of information there that people can draw upon.
So yeah, so that's they could just print screenshots, etc., when they do their appeal, and like to show that maybe their
Yes.
assessment is like a little bit over.
Definitely, Trudy, and you clearly you've probably tried to do all this work yourself, and other people that have. What I want the listeners out there to know is that when you appeal, you don't have to do all this research. When you make an appeal, we will have our team look at the value of your property in several different ways, like more than 5 different ways, to see if, hey, is there an alternative way of looking at this that would result in a lower value? And you don't have to, a homeowner does not have to provide their own comparables. It's fun, it's interesting to research these own comparables, but I know people who they didn't apply because they felt like they didn't have the time to do the work to find their own comparables. We all live busy lives, right? And not all of us get excited or prepared to do this. You can appeal without finding those comparables, and generally you can get good results from that without finding your own comparables. And this is why we also remind people you do not need to hire a lawyer to appeal, because this is really about data. Even though appeals are on the decline, we're also happy to see more and more people are doing appeals themselves through through the digital appeals or paper appeals without bringing in another person who's just going to take some of the savings that you're entitled to. When you're the expert on your home, there's no greater expert on your home than you. And this is an issue that's about data. So why we just constantly reiterate that there's no cost to appeal, and you don't have to hire a lawyer to appeal. And there's no you do not have to invest a lot of time in researching comparables if you don't want to.
Mhm. And some people actually their assessment was lower, but is there a chance that even they would benefit if they appeal because maybe their assessment should have been even lower?
Yeah, yes, it's always possible that we're off the mark in our estimate of the value of a home. So what we ask people to do, and this we do this in our mailers to the community, is to take a look at our estimated market value of your home. Is that within plus or minus 10% of what you think your home is worth? If it is, it's probably not worth it to make an appeal. The savings might not be significant, might not be worth your time. But if it is greater than that, then by all means appeal with us. And that can happen even if our assessment lowered. You might be in a community where the market dynamics are such that our estimate could be off, or our estimate in the past might have been really high, but even though we reduced it, it's still too high. All these things can happen. The key thing to measure it is the measuring stick is what is our estimate of market value, and you as a homeowner, you probably have a good idea of what your home is worth in the market, and that's sort of a way to instantly flag if we got it wrong. This is also a good reminder, Trudy, that if your assessment rose, as was the general experience in our reassessment of Chicago, that does not mean that your taxes will rise. I've been trying to remind people of this, that there's the property tax that is collected that our assessments are used for is a fixed amount each year. It grows a little bit, but if the assessed value in the city grows 50%, that does not mean that we're going to be collecting 50% more taxes. Taxes might, the treasurer's office will only collect a couple more percentage points. So it just means that we're dividing up the burden differently. And the key thing to know is that in Chicago, the assessed value of all property rose a little bit more than 40%, whereas most homeowners' assessment rose in the neighborhood of 20%, much lower than the overall change. And so that means that many people, most people who own homes will have a lower share of the assessed value than before. And so their tax bills could be down even though their assessed value went up. And this is not intuitive. A lot of people don't understand this, but know that the proof is in the pudding what happened the last couple of years. Assessed values rose in most communities in 2019 and 2020. But residential property tax bills were up just 1% across the county. So that just goes to show you that assessed values can rise, but your property taxes don't necessarily.
Okay, that's good to know. Also, I've heard a lot of taxpayers say that they're afraid to appeal because they're afraid that if the assessed value goes down, then they can't sell the house for that price or higher. Could you speak on that?
Sure, I hear this a lot too, Trudy. People sometimes they forget the distinction between the appraisal value that you have when you're going for a mortgage or looking to sell your home or buy a home. That's done by a bank, typically. And the assessed value, which is our office's estimate of value for the purposes of property taxes. And generally, your home is going to be worth more if the tax bill is lower, everything else being equal. So it's probably smart for a person to make sure that their assessment is not too high and is in line with the market, so that the tax bill can be lowered, and that might help with the resale value of the house. Especially in Cook County, where not because of assessments, but just because of the way our state funds education, property taxes tend to be high. So that's why it's worthwhile for homeowners to make sure that their assessments are in line with the market and not over, so that they have the best shot that they can at the good resale value for their house.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's do a community assessment with you, if you don't mind. It's WZRD Chicago, being a nonprofit radio station, must be responsible to the community we serve. WZRD is mandated to file quarterly issues with the FCC on non-entertainment, community-focused programming and we like to assess the community for these quarterly issue topics with 3 questions. First, what is most important to you, Assessor Kaegi?
Sure. So we are trying to make sure that our estimates of market value are as accurate as they can be. And we know that there's been the most inaccuracy in the past in commercial properties at our office. And so we're trying to get better data. It's really better data that will help us get better at that. And that everyone has an interest in this, even if you don't own commercial property, because we all share in the tax burden together. So we've worked hard in Illinois to have a bill passed which reflects best practices in a lot of our peer jurisdictions. It's called the Data Modernization Bill, and it would build a anonymized data collection framework for commercial properties, larger commercial properties, that would just give us a better line of sight into the average rent, expenses, and vacancy in commercial properties so that we could see those differences between 53rd Street and 43rd Street and 71st Street. Or you could probably think of different corridors in Rogers Park too, Trudy, how each corridor is a little bit different, but the data we have might not see that difference. And with this bill that we've sought passage of in Springfield, that would help to resolve that problem. It would make the system fairer and more predictable, less costly for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Do you know of other jurisdictions in the country that are already using such data modernization?
Sure, yes. So a lot of our biggest competitors nationally, New York, Boston, the Seattle area, King County, jurisdictions in the South, Washington, D.C. These places have good data collection frameworks and they have more accurate systems. We've been told by people who invest their money in this, and it would build confidence in our systems. You know, those places, they have more accurate assessments, they have fewer appeals. We'd really like to work towards that.
Mm-hmm. Second, what long-term problem must we address?
I think another important, really long-term problem that touches on everyone who pays property taxes, and even those who don't, is how we fund schools in the state. People might think that those two things aren't connected, but they're so closely tied. Most property taxes are for funding the education of our children. That's because school districts depend on property taxes to fund themselves. Our state is dead last in the nation, number 50, for state funding of our school districts. In percentage of their budgets, it's about 25%. In most states, it's closer to 50%. Including nearby peers like Indiana. They get much more school funding from their states and counties than we do. And that is why property taxes tend to be high in Cook County and in Illinois. And it also increases disparities because some communities that don't have much property value, they want to be able to educate their kids too. And they end up needing to have very high rates to fund their schools. Our neighbors who live in the south suburbs and some of the west suburbs really feel this. There are rates in some communities like Harvey and Dalton that are 6 times what they are in the city or in most of the rest of the county. That's not fair to someone who's investing their savings in a home in those communities. And the way we could make it more fair is every dollar that comes from the state that helps us support schools in those communities, $1 less that has to be in that disparity, that has to be raised in property taxes on people in those communities. You know, I think of a person in Harvey who bought a home and through no fault of their own, this distortion in the property tax system has penalized them through high bills and declining property values and higher rates. And they don't deserve to have this disparity impact them. And the way we address it is that funding of schools. Now, it can come from the state, but funding that comes from the federal government also could help this. You know, the federal government contributes somewhere between 8 to 10% of many school districts' funding, sometime more. And the more federal government funding for schools, which is called Title I, that comes in, is just as beneficial as another dollar coming in from the state. And the federal government has much more capacity to fund our schools, especially in a digital economy, where the federal government is really in the best position to tax something like what we're doing now, Zoom. The state doesn't have a good way to tax Zoom, but the federal government does. And that could help to support funding of our children. This is a very important question and problem that needs to be addressed.
Finally, what problem must be resolved now?
I think when I look at homeowners evaluations and assessments, we've really reduced the disparity and bias that was there for a long time. But we still see a tendency that homes at the bottom end of the spectrum sometimes can be overassessed because we don't have enough information about their quality or conditions. And that's because we can't go inside people's homes as assessors. This data is out there. It's held by the federal government in something called the Uniform Appraisal Database. And I'm part of a group of the top 15 assessors in America. We've met with the White House, the Domestic Policy Council. We've met with the Federal Housing Finance Administration, which oversees this database, and we're asking them to open up information just about the quality and condition ratings of homes that they have so that we can make assessments less regressive, more fair for homes across America, not only here in Cook County, but across America. And we think this solution, which wouldn't cost the government hardly anything, is the most impactful way to make property taxes not only fairer here, but elsewhere in the rest of the nation too. And look, economic inequality is the biggest problem in America, one of the biggest problems in America right now, and they can help with this. So that's what's ahead.
Do you know what the Uniform Appraisal Database is used for now, if it's not used to help appraisers?
Yes, so the Uniform Appraisal Database is part of our federal mortgage system. So the federal government guarantees mortgages that are issued by banks and other entities. They guarantee them through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which are government chartered companies under the conservatorship of the government. But the government also guarantees mortgages through the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, and the Veterans Administration. And every mortgage that's guaranteed through these entities by our federal government has mortgage data that goes into this database, these appraisals. And this data is so rich, it encompasses over 100 million homes. And that's why it would really be a super way to solve this basic national problem of us not having enough information about condition and quality in homes at the bottom end of the spectrum, and reducing overassessment for homes which might not have been fixed up in a long time, but don't have the same kind of quality as the average home.
Are there steps now being taken toward opening up the Uniform Appraisal Database?
Well, Bloomberg, which is a big national data service, they wrote a big article about this effort in December. Us assessors, we wrote the letter back in August of 2021. We met with the Domestic Policy Council of the White House and the Federal Housing Finance Administration in January, and we continue to have ongoing follow-ups from those meetings.
And is there a comparable database for commercial properties?
No, there is not, because we don't have the same kind of mortgage system for commercial that we have for residential. But there's another data set that we can use. When commercial mortgages are issued and put into bonds that are sold to investors nationally, we can access the appraisals that people who have those mortgages have. They're included with those bonds. And so one of the things that we've done at our office is to access this whole other source of data that we've never accessed before. So when someone buys the Willis Tower or someone buys the Aon Tower, they have an appraisal that's submitted to the SEC with these bonds that we can see. And so that gives us lots of information that's useful in valuing those buildings. Because if a lender is if a borrower is saying, well, we think the Willis Tower is worth this amount, and if a lender agrees with them and uses that as collateral, that's pretty good evidence for us in coming up with a value for it.
Right. Well, Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi, thank you so much for joining us and answering so many questions and helping taxpayers. So I know you've mentioned it many times, but again, give our listeners your telephone number and also your the address of your website.
Sure. So our website is cookcountyassessor.com. And our phone number is 312-443-7550. Again, it's 312-443-7550. And the website is cookcountyassessor.com.
Thank you so much, Assessor Kaegi, for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. Be safe.
Thanks, Trudy.